My toxic ex-husband grabbed the mic at my sister's wedding and called me barren leftovers in front of the entire pack. The room erupted in laughter, until the quiet bartender shattered a glass, vaulted over the counter, and punched my ex into the wedding cake. As he pulled me into his arms, his eyes turned gold and he roared, "She is not leftovers. She is with the king." Chapter 1. It felt like walking into a cage. One made of gold, silk, and whispered cruelty. Ivy stopped at the edge of the ballroom. Her breath hitched. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to turn around, to run, to shift into her wolf and sprint until her paws bled and the scent of this place was gone. Yet, she couldn't, because that would let them win. She gripped her small clutch so tight her knuckles turned white. The room was loud, a chaotic symphony of clinking glass and forced laughter. It reeked of roasted meat and expensive perfume. But underneath that, it smelled like judgment. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't block out the voices. "Is that her?" A whisper drifted from her left. "The barren one," another sneered. "I can't believe she showed up." Ivy kept her chin down. She focused on the floor, counting the marble tiles. 1, 2, 3. If she stared hard enough, maybe the floor would open up and swallow her whole. That would be easier than seeing him. Derek. Just the name made her stomach twist. It wasn't love. Not anymore. It was shame. Hot, sticky shame that coated her skin like oil. He had discarded her because she couldn't give him a pup. And now, here she was at her sister's wedding, watching him parade his new mate around. What's worse, she had to smile about it. She took a shaky step forward. Her green dress felt too tight, too revealing. She felt exposed, like a deer standing in a clearing while hunters loaded their rifles. She needed a drink. In fact, she needed 5. She scanned the room, her eyes darting over the packs preening in their finery. It all felt fake, a lie painted over teeth and claws. Then, she saw it. The bar. It was tucked away in the corner. Dark, quiet, made of heavy mahogany that looked solid enough to hide behind. An island in the middle of a storm. As if pulled by a string, she moved toward it. She didn't look left. She didn't look right. She just walked, her heels clicking a lonely rhythm on the stone. She passed a group of alpha females. They went silent. Their silence was louder than their words. It judged her. It mocked her. Unwanted, broken, leftovers. Even so, Ivy kept walking. She reached the bar and gripped the cool wood. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Safe, she breathed. Or as safe as she could be in a room full of wolves who wanted to tear her apart with their smiles. She sat on the tall stool, her back to the party. She hunched her shoulders, making herself small. If she stayed invisible, maybe she could survive the night without bleeding. But, deep down, in the hollow place where her wolf used to howl, she knew better. The night was young, and the monsters were just getting started.
He hated weddings. Silas wiped a smudge off the crystal glass. His movements slow, precise. To anyone watching, he was just a bartender, just part of the furniture, a big guy in a white shirt and a canvas apron, serving drinks to the elite. But they weren't watching. They never watched the help. That was their mistake. Because if they looked, really looked, they would see that his hands didn't shake. They would see that his eyes weren't serving. They were hunting. He set the glass down. It clinked softly against the bar top. The ballroom was a cesspool. It reeked of ego. Alpha pheromones hung in the air like smog, thick and choking. Every male in the room was puffing out his chest, trying to look tough. Silas fought the urge to roll his eyes. He could kill half of them with a spoon and the other half with a look. But he wasn't here to fight. He was here to work. There was a killer in the room, an assassin, rumored to be targeting the groom's family. Silas wasn't going to let that happen. Not on his watch. Not in his kingdom. So, he stood here, wiping glasses, pouring cheap champagne, waiting for a shadow to move the wrong way. He scanned the crowd again, his gaze sharp, dissecting every movement. Nothing yet, just pompous idiots. He sighed, a low rumble in his chest that was half growl. He grabbed a lime and a knife. He sliced the fruit. Slice, slice, slice. The blade moved with lethal grace. Without warning, the air shifted. A scent hit him. It didn't smell like the others. It didn't smell like synthetic flowers or desperate arousal. It smelled clean, like rain hitting dry earth, like ozone before a lightning strike. And something else. Salt, old wounds, sadness. Silas looked up. A woman was walking toward his bar. She was wearing green, the color of deep forest moss. She wasn't strutting. She was surviving. He could see it in the tension of her neck. Tight, defensive. She walked like she expected to be hit. His wolf stirred. Who? Silas narrowed his eyes. She reached the bar and grabbed it like a life raft. She sat down, turning her back to the room. Hiding. She was beautiful, not in the flashy way the others were. She was beautiful like a bruised flower, dark hair, pale skin, and eyes that held too many winters. She didn't look at him. She just stared at the wood grain, her hands trembling. Strange, most wolves ignored him, or they treated him like a servant, snapping their fingers, but she treated him like a wall. Something solid to put between her and them. Silas stopped wiping the glass. He usually didn't care about the personal dramas of the pack. They were petty, beneath him. But this woman, she smelled like rain, and for the first time all night, Silas wasn't bored. He was curious. He tossed the rag over his shoulder. He didn't ask what she wanted. He knew. He could smell the stress pouring off her in waves. He reached for the whiskey. The good stuff. The bottle he kept under the counter for himself, because of that scent, and that sad curve of her neck. He decided she deserved better than the watered-down trash he was serving everyone else.
She didn't even have to order. The glass slid across the mahogany bar. Silent and smooth. It stopped right in front of her hand. Ivy blinked. She looked up, startled. The bartender was watching her. He was big, massive. His shoulders strained against the white fabric of his shirt. His forearms were thick, corded with muscle and dusted with dark hair. He didn't look like a bartender. He looked like a bouncer or a warrior. But his eyes, they were dark, endless, and they weren't looking past her. They were looking at her. "Drink," he said. His voice was deep. It vibrated in her chest, a low thrum that made her wolf perk up its ears. It wasn't a question. It was a command. But it wasn't mean. It was steady. Ivy looked at the glass. Amber liquid. No ice. "I didn't order this," she whispered. Her voice sounded rusty. "You looked like you needed it," he replied. He didn't smile. He just leaned back against the shelves, crossing his massive arms over his chest. The apron looked ridiculous on him, like tying a ribbon on a grizzly bear. Ivy let out a shaky laugh. "Is it that obvious?" "You look like you're at a funeral," he said flatly. "Not a wedding." Ivy flinched. "Same thing, depending on who you ask." She picked up the glass. Her hand shook. Just a little. She took a sip. It burned. It burned in a good way, searing a path down her throat and settling in her stomach like liquid courage. "Thanks," she murmured. "Rough night?" he asked. "You have no idea." Ivy took another sip, a bigger one. The alcohol hit her blood, softening the edges of her panic. "My ex-husband is here, with his new, perfect, pregnant mate." She didn't know why she told him that. She never told anyone anything. Maybe it was because he was a stranger. Maybe it was because he looked like he could keep a secret. The bartender's eyes tightened. "Just a fraction. And let me guess, he's a prick." Ivy laughed again. This time it was real. Prick doesn't even cover it. For a second, just a second. The weight on her chest lifted. It was just her and this giant, quiet man. The noise of the party faded, but then, screech, feedback whined through the speakers, a horrible, high-pitched sound that made everyone wince. Ivy froze. The glass stopped halfway to her mouth. She knew that sound. She turned on the stool, ate, slowly, dread pooling in her gut. In the center of the room, standing on the small stage, was Derek. He was swaying. His face was flushed red. He had a microphone in one hand and a champagne flute in the other, drunk, and looking right at her. "Attention," Derek slurred into the mic. "Everyone, shut up for a second. I want to make a toast." The room went quiet. Deadly quiet. Ivy's heart hammered against her ribs. "To my beautiful mate," Derek yelled, gesturing to the blonde woman beaming at the head table. "For giving me what I always wanted, a son." Applause rippled through the room. Polite, awkward, and... Derek's eyes found Ivy in the shadows. He grinned, a cruel, twisted grin. "And to my ex-wife, Ivy." Hiding in the corner with the help, the air left the room. "Raise a glass to Ivy." Derek laughed. It was a jagged sound. The only wolf in the pack who couldn't keep a man. Old, barren, leftovers. The words hit her like physical blows. Slap, slap, slap. The room erupted in uncomfortable laughter. Eyes turned to her. Hundreds of them. Pitying, mocking. Ivy couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. She was frozen. A statue of shame. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream. But her throat was closed shut. She wished she was dead. Right then and there. Crash. The sound wasn't a laugh. It was heavy crystal detonating against wood. The room silenced instantly. Ivy flinched. She turned back to the bar. The bartender was gone. Or rather, the bartender was transforming. His eyes were burning with a fire that terrified her. His lips were pulled back in a snarl that was pure animal, and he wasn't looking at the glass he just broke. He was looking at Derek, and he looked like he was about to tear the world apart.
The sound of shattering crystal was the only warning they got. Silas didn't just walk around the bar. He vaulted it. In a single heartbeat, the heavy mahogany barrier became irrelevant. He placed one hand on the polished wood and launched his massive frame over it. His movements fluid and terrifyingly fast. Thud. His boots hit the marble floor. The impact vibrated through the soles of his feet, grounding him, preparing him for violence. He ripped the canvas apron from his chest. Buttons popped and pinged against the floor like hail. He tossed the fabric aside, revealing the holster strapped to his ribs and the black tactical shirt that clung to muscles coiled with lethal tension. The room gasped. "Who is this waiter?" their sense asked. "Why is he so big?" Silas didn't care. His vision narrowed to a tunnel. At the end of that tunnel was Derek. The drunk, pathetic excuse for a male who dared to bare his teeth at a female he wasn't worthy to look at. Silas marched forward. The crowd parted. They didn't move out of respect. They moved out of primal fear. They could smell the change in the air, the ozone, the burning wood, the scent of an apex predator who had stopped pretending to be a sheep. Derek stood on the stage, the microphone dangling, his mouth hanging open in a drunken stupor. "Hey," he slurred, blinking. "You're the bartender." Silas didn't stop. He didn't speak. Instead, he moved. He closed the distance in 2 strides. His fist, heavy and hard as a sledgehammer, connected with Derek's jaw. Crack. The sound was sickeningly satisfying. It echoed off the high ceilings, louder than the microphone feedback. Derek didn't just fall. He flew. He lifted off his feet, arching through the air like a rag doll, before crashing spectacularly into the 5-tier wedding cake. Frosting exploded. Sponge cake disintegrated. Derek groaned. buried in a ruin of sugar and humiliation. The room went dead silent. Silas turned. He didn't look at the mess he made. He looked at Ivy. She was frozen on the bar stool, her green eyes wide, her face pale. She looked terrified. Not of Derek, of him. That hurt. Somewhere deep in his chest, his wolf whined at her fear. He needed to fix it. He needed to claim. He walked to her, ignoring the stunned whispers rippling through the hall. He stopped inches from her knees. He reached out, his hand large and warm, and wrapped it around her waist. He pulled her off the stool and into his side, tucking her against his body like she was a missing rib he had finally found. She was trembling. "You're okay," he murmured, his voice rough with suppressed rage. "I've got you." Then, he looked up at the crowd. He let his eyes bleed from dark brown to glowing amber. He let the alpha power he had been suppressing for weeks flood the room, heavy and suffocating. "She is not leftovers," Silas roared, his voice vibrating with the command that forced every wolf in the room to bare their necks. "She is with the king."
The king. The words hung in the air, heavier than the silence, sharper than the glass on the floor. Ivy's world tilted. Her breath caught, strangling a scream. She looked up at the man holding her, the bartender, the quiet, intense man who poured her whiskey and listened to her complain about her shoes. He wasn't a bartender. He was Silas, king of the Shifter Coalition, the alpha of alphas, the most dangerous predator on the continent, and his arm was wrapped around her waist. "No," she whispered, the word barely audible. You can't be." But he was. She could feel it now. The power radiating off him was like standing next to a nuclear reactor. It made her skin prickle. It made her wolf drop its belly to the ground in instant, instinctive submission. He lied. Her mind screamed. "He lied to me." Panic flared in her chest, hot and suffocating. She tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. He wasn't hurting her, but he wasn't letting go. He was a statue of muscle and heat, his amber eyes scanning the room, challenging anyone to move. Derek was groaning in the ruins of the cake, wiping frosting from his bleeding jaw. The guests were bowing, dropping to their knees in waves as the realization hit them. But Silas wasn't looking at them. His head snapped to the left. His nostrils flared. "Down," he growled. Before she could move, he shoved her behind him. Pop, pop. 2 sounds. Soft, like champagne corks. Smash. The vase on the table next to them exploded into shards. Gunfire. Screams erupted. The ballroom dissolved into chaos. Wolves shifted, clothes tearing, fur sprouting. Tables were overturned. "Assassin!" Silas roared. Ivy stood there, paralyzed. Her ordinary, miserable night had just turned into a war zone. A waiter near the exit, a man she hadn't noticed before, dropped his tray. But instead of picking it up, he pulled a silver handgun from his waistband. His eyes were dead, cold. He raised the weapon, aiming not at the crowd, but right at the king's chest. "Move!" Silas shouted. He shifted. It wasn't slow and romantic like in the movies. It was violent. Bones snapped, muscles rearranged with sickening crunches. In the span of a breath, the man was gone, and a massive black wolf stood in his place. He was huge, twice the size of a normal wolf, with fur as dark as a nightmare and eyes that burned like hellfire. The wolf lunged at the gunman, a blur of shadow and teeth. Ivy was alone, exposed, and then she saw him. A second man. He had been hiding near the DJ booth. He held a jagged knife, and his eyes weren't on the king. They were on her, because she was the weakness. She was the distraction. He smiled, revealing yellow teeth, and sprinted toward her. Her body moved on instinct. Ivy didn't think. There was no time to think. If she thought, she would die. The attacker was fast. He was already halfway across the dance floor, the knife glinting under the chandelier lights. He expected her to scream. He expected her to cower. He expected the broken, barren woman Derek had laughed at. Instead, he got Ivy. And Ivy was done being a victim. To make things worse for him, she was wearing heels. She kicked them off. Thump, thump. She scanned the area. No weapons, just wedding gifts, half-eaten food, and the silver serving tray. It was sitting on a busboy's stand next to her. Heavy, solid silver, engraved with her sister's initials. Her hand shot out. Her fingers curled around the cold metal rim. The attacker lunged. "Die, bitch!" he hissed. Ivy didn't scream. She gritted her teeth. She swung the tray with both hands, putting every ounce of her frustration, her humiliation, and her terror into the motion. Clang! The impact vibrated all the way up her arms. The edge of the heavy tray connected squarely with the attacker's face. His nose crunched. Blood sprayed across the white tablecloths. He didn't just stop. He crumpled. The knife skittered across the floor. Ivy stood there, chest heaving, the dented tray raised like a shield. I did that, she thought. I fought back. Behind her, a low growl shook the floorboards. She turned. The massive black wolf Silas was standing over the body of the gunman, but he wasn't looking at his kill. He was looking at her. His muzzle was stained with red. His golden eyes were wide, fixed on the tray in her hands and the unconscious man at her feet. There was no judgment in those eyes now. There was awe. "Run," his eyes said. He jerked his massive head toward the kitchen exit. Ivy dropped the tray. It clattered loudly, a final note in the symphony of violence. She didn't wait for him to ask twice. She ran. She sprinted through the kitchen doors, the king of wolves thundering at her heels, leaving the ruins of her old life behind in a pile of broken glass and blood.
The safe house door slammed shut. Boom. It sounded like a prison cell closing. Silas engaged the deadbolts, 3 of them before turning to face the room. It was sterile, white walls, steel furniture. It smelled like bleach and filtered air. It didn't smell like home. It smelled like survival. His wolf was still pacing under his skin, scratching at his ribs, demanding blood. The fight at the wedding hadn't been enough. The threat wasn't gone. It was just paused. He ran a hand through his hair, wincing as a bruise on his shoulder throbbed. He looked across the room. Evie. She was standing by the window, hugging herself. Her green dress was torn at the hem. Her hair was a wild tangle of dark curls. There was a smear of dried blood on her cheek, not hers. Thank the moon, but it looked violent against her pale skin. She was shaking. "She's terrified," his wolf whined. "Comfort, mate." Silas took a step toward her. He needed to take charge. He was the king. People felt safe when he gave orders. That was how it worked. "Sit down," he said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "A command. I have a medic coming to check you for shock." Ivy didn't move. She didn't even blink. She just stared at the blackout curtains, as if she could see the assassins waiting outside. Silas frowned. He wasn't used to being ignored. "Ivy," he said, sharper this time. "That was an order. You need to sit." Because of that tone, she finally turned. Her eyes weren't wet with tears. They were dry, and they were burning. She looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, Silas felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Unease. She didn't look like a damsel in distress anymore. She looked like the woman who had smashed a silver tray into a man's face. "An order?" she repeated. Her voice was quiet, but it had edges, sharp ones. "You think you can just order me around? After you dragged me out of there?" Silas stiffened. "I saved your life. You ruined my life," she snapped. "I was just the pathetic ex-wife at a wedding. Now I'm, whatever this is, with the king." She spat the word king like it was a curse. Silas crossed his arms. His muscles were tight, ready for a fight, but he couldn't fight her. "I did what was necessary." The assassin. "You lied," she shouted. The sound bounced off the metal walls. "You sat there, pouring me drinks, letting me talk about my shoes. letting me think you were safe. Silas stopped. The accusation hit him harder than a punch. She wasn't mad about the danger. She was mad about the betrayal. Yet, he couldn't apologize. Kings didn't apologize. It showed weakness. I was undercover, he stated coldly. It wasn't personal. It was tactical. Tactical? She laughed. It was a brittle sound. Well, your tactics suck, Your Majesty, because I'm not a soldier. I'm a bartender's friend. And right now, I miss the bartender.
Her chest heaved. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had just yelled at the Wolf King. Ivy stared at him. He was standing in the middle of the room, looking like a confused thundercloud. He was massive, dangerous, and radiating so much power it made the air heavy. But she didn't care. The fear had burned away. Now, there was only anger. Hot, white anger. "You played me," she said, her voice shaking. "You let me sit there and cry over my ex-husband while you were probably laughing inside." Silas blinked. The hard lines of his face softened just a fraction. "I wasn't laughing." "You were lying," she countered. She took a step toward him. It was reckless, stupid, but she couldn't stop. "You made me feel safe. Do you know how rare that is?" "I felt safe with him, with the guy in the apron, not with you." She poked a finger at his chest. It was like poking a granite wall. "You're just like Derek," she whispered. "Using your rank to get what you want." The room went deadly silent. The air thickened. Silas's eyes flashed gold. He took a step closer, crowding her space. He smelled like cedar and rain and danger. "I am nothing like him," he growled. Low, menacing. Ivy didn't back down. She tilted her chin up. "Then prove it. Stop barking orders at me. Stop treating me like a package you have to deliver." She let out a breath, her energy draining away as quickly as it had come. She slumped, rubbing her temples. "God," she muttered. "You were pouring me margaritas 2 hours ago. And they were terrible, by the way. Too much lime." Silas paused. He looked at her. Then, he looked at his hands, the hands that could crush skulls but had fumbled with the cocktail shaker. A strange sound rumbled in his chest. He chuckled. It wasn't a mocking laugh. It was rusty, deep, genuine. "They were terrible," he admitted. The alpha mask slipped, just for a second. "I'm better at whiskey." Ivy looked at him, surprised. The tension in the room snapped. In the quiet that followed, she realized something. He was terrifying. Yes, but he was also just a man who was tired, a man who had saved her when no one else would. "Okay," she breathed out. "Whiskey. Next time, just give me whiskey." Silas watched her. His eyes were intense again, but the anger was gone. "Deal."
He watched her pace the small room. She had kicked off her heels hours ago. She was barefoot, limping slightly, but she kept moving. She was restless. Silas sat at the steel table, a map spread out in front of him. His phone buzzed. It was Varric, his general. The news wasn't good. The assassin at the wedding was just a hired gun. The person who paid him was still out there. And they knew Silas had blown his cover for Ivy, which meant she was a target. He watched her again. She wasn't cowering in the corner. She was angry. She was alive. She had fire in her. She fought back, his wolf reminded him. She hit the wolf with a tray. An idea began to form in his mind. It was dangerous, reckless. Varric would hate it, but it was the only way. "Ivy," Silas said. She stopped pacing and looked at him wary. "What now? More orders?" "A proposal," he said. He leaned back in the chair, studying her. "The assassin missed. He will try again. And he knows I came out of hiding for you." Ivy wrapped her arms around herself. "So? What does that mean?" "It means they think you're my weakness," Silas said. He let the words hang there. "They think you are my mate." Ivy's face flushed pink. "But I'm not. We barely know each other. They don't know that." Silas replied. He stood up, walking toward her slowly. To them I claimed you. I killed for you. In our world, that is a binding contract. He stopped in front of her. He could smell her anxiety. But under that, curiosity. I need to draw the mastermind out, Silas explained. His voice was low, plotting. I need them to attack us on my terms, not in a crowded room, somewhere I can control. And how do we do that? She asked. Silas looked into her green eyes. We give them a target they can't resist. We give them a royal wedding. Ivy's jaw dropped. You want to get married? Fake married, Silas corrected quickly, though his wolf didn't like the word fake. We announce it. We make it a spectacle. The king marrying the commoner. It will drive my enemies insane. They will attack at the ceremony, and, when they do, his eyes darkened. We will be waiting. Ivy stared at him. You want to use me as bait? No, Silas said firmly. He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray curl from her cheek. His touch was electric. I want to use us as a trap, but I can't do it alone. I need a queen who can fight. He paused. I saw you with that tray, Ivy. You aren't weak. You are a survivor. Help me end this. She looked at his hand, then up at his eyes. She was terrified. He could see it. Then, she took a deep breath. She squared her shoulders. If we do this, she said, her voice steady. If I play your queen, I want one thing. Silas raised an eyebrow. Name it. When this is over, she said, you help me disappear, somewhere safe. Somewhere Derek can never find me. Silas felt a sharp pang in his chest at the thought of her leaving, but he nodded. I swear it. Okay, Ivy whispered. Let's catch a killer. She held out her hand. Silas took it. Her skin was soft against his calluses. It felt right. And so, the lie began. But as he looked at her, standing tall in her ruined dress, Silas wondered if the lie might be the truest thing he had ever known. The war room smelled like stale coffee and old maps. Silas stood at the head of the heavy oak table. His hands were pressed flat against the wood. He stared down at the blueprints of the royal chapel. It's a risk, sire. The voice was smooth. Too smooth, like oil sliding over a blade. Silas didn't look up. He knew who it was. General Varick, his oldest advisor, the man who had taught him how to hold a knife before he could walk. Varick was standing in the shadows, polishing his spectacles with a silk handkerchief. Life is a risk, Varick, Silas grunted. The assassin is out there. If we don't draw him out, he picks us off one by one. Agreed, Varick said. He stepped into the light. He was older, his hair silver, his uniform pressed so sharp it could cut skin. But a wedding? To her? Silas stiffened. His wolf didn't like the tone. It sounded like Varick was talking about a stray dog. Her name is Ivy, Silas said. His voice dropped an octave. A warning. Of course. Varick smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were cold, calculating. The civilian. I simply worry about her pedigree. She is a winter wolf, is she not? Weak bloodline. If the assassin strikes, she will break. Silas looked at the general. For a second, just a second, he felt a prickle of unease. A warning bell deep in his gut. Don't trust him, his instincts whispered. Yet, logic took over. Varick was loyal. He had served Silas's father. He was just old-fashioned. He just wanted the king to be safe. So, Silas pushed the doubt away. She won't break, Silas said firmly. He thought of the silver tray. He thought of the fire in her eyes when she yelled at him. She has teeth, Varick. You'd do well to remember that. Varick bowed his head. As you say, my king, I have doubled the guard. I will personally oversee the perimeter. No one gets in without my approval. Good. Silas straightened up. He rubbed his neck. Then let's get this over with. I have a wedding to attend. He walked toward the door. Sire? Varick called out. Silas stopped, hand on the latch. Make sure she wears the Kevlar corset under the dress, Varric said softly. It would be a shame to stain the white silk with red. Silas didn't answer. He just walked out. But as the door clicked shut, the cold feeling in his gut didn't go away.
The dress weighed 50 pounds. It wasn't just fabric. It was armor. Layers of white silk, embroidered with pearls, and stiffened with silver thread. Underneath it, she wore a bulletproof bodice that pinched her ribs. Ivy stood at the massive double doors of the cathedral. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like a hummingbird trapped in her chest. Thump, thump, thump. She couldn't do this. She was just Ivy, the girl who got dumped at a reception. She wasn't a queen. She was a fraud. Breathe, a voice whispered. She looked to her right. One of the guards nodded at her. The music swelled. Organ pipes blasted a sound that shook the floor. Here we go. The doors groaned open. Light flooded in. Blinding white light. Ivy stepped forward. Her legs felt like jelly, but she forced them to move. Left, right, left. The aisle was endless. On either side, hundreds of wolves stood. The elite, the powerful. They were all staring at her, judging her, sniffing the air to see if she was worthy. Then, she saw him, Silas. He was standing at the altar. He wasn't wearing an apron today. He was wearing a black military uniform with gold braiding. He looked lethal. He looked royal. And he was looking at her like she was the only person in the room. His eyes were golden anchors. They grabbed her and pulled her, steadied her. You are not alone, his gaze promised. I've got you. Because of that look, Ivy lifted her chin. She wasn't walking to her death. She was walking to her partner. She passed the third row, and there he was. Derek. He was standing near the aisle. His mouth was hanging open. He looked small, pathetic. He looked at her. At the diamonds in her hair. At the power radiating off her. And he turned pale. Ivy didn't look away. She locked eyes with him. She didn't smirk. She didn't frown. She just looked through him, like he was a ghost, like he was nothing. She saw him flinch. It was the best feeling in the world. She reached the altar. Silas reached out a hand. His fingers were warm, solid. Ready? He whispered. As I'll ever be, she breathed back. The priest began to speak. Ancient words about moon and blood. Silas picked up the crown. It was thin, made of woven silver and raw moonstones. He lifted it high. With this circle, Silas said, his voice ringing out like a bell, I claim you, my queen. He lowered it. The cold metal touched her forehead. Crash! The stained glass window above them exploded. Get down! Silas roared. He didn't wait. He tackled her. They hit the stone floor hard. Ivy gasped as the air left her lungs. Shards of colored glass rained down like deadly confetti. A figure in black dropped from the ceiling on a wire, a gun blazing in each hand. Screams. Chaos. But Silas was ready. As the assassin landed, Silas was already moving. He didn't shift. He didn't need to. He drew a silver handgun from his holster and fired. Bang, bang, 2 shots. The assassin dropped, dead before he hit the ground. Silence returned to the cathedral. Silas stood up, pulling Ivy with him. He kept his body between her and the crowd. He looked at the dead man. Then he looked at the shattered window. Is that it? Ivy whispered, her ears ringing. Is it over? Silas looked around. His face was grim. It was too easy, he muttered. Way too easy.
The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a buzzing exhaustion. Silas leaned back in the leather seat of the armored limousine. The city was blurring past the tinted windows. They were leaving the capital, heading to the coast, to the private villa, the honeymoon. Next to him, Ivy was asleep. She was curled up against the door, still wearing the ridiculous wedding dress. Her crown was crooked. She looked peaceful, Silas watched her chest rise and fall. He felt a fierce wave of protectiveness wash over him. It scared him. This was supposed to be a trap, a fake marriage. But when that glass shattered, when he covered her body with his own, it didn't feel fake. It felt like his heart was beating outside his chest. The car slowed. They pulled up to the cliffside villa. It was a fortress of glass and stone, overlooking the crashing black ocean. The door opened. Varric was there. He had arrived ahead of them with the advance team. "My king," Varric bowed. "The perimeter is secure. The assassin was a rogue mercenary. We found the payment trail. It leads to a dead end, but the threat is neutralized." Silas nodded. He stepped out, then reached back in to carefully lift Ivy into his arms. She stirred, mumbling something about shoes, but didn't wake up. "Good work, Varric," Silas said. He felt lighter. The threat was dead. The plan had worked. "I took the liberty of leaving a gift in the master suite," Varric said, his voice low and respectful. "A bottle of the 54 vintage, to celebrate your union." Silas smiled. A real smile. "Thank you, old friend." He carried Ivy up the stairs, past the guards, into the massive bedroom that smelled of lavender and salt. He laid her on the bed. She looked like a sleeping angel in a pile of clouds. Silas loosened his tie. He walked to the table. There it was, the bottle of wine, dark red, heavy. He needed a drink. He needed to wash the taste of gunpowder out of his mouth. He popped the cork. Pop. He poured 2 glasses, one for him, one for her. When she woke up, he walked to the balcony doors, looking out at the moon reflecting on the water. He took a sip. The wine was rich, velvety. "To victory," he whispered to the night. But then, his fingers went numb. Just the tips at first, then his hand. He frowned. He looked at the glass. Drop. The glass slipped from his fingers. It shattered on the floor. Red wine spilled like blood. Silas tried to take a breath, but his lungs felt heavy, like they were filled with concrete. "What?" He turned to look at the bed. At Ivy. His vision blurred. The room spun. "Ivy," he tried to say, but his tongue was thick. He fell. Thud. His knees hit the floor. He clawed at his throat, his veins. He could see the veins in his hands turning black. Poison. Not just any poison. Necrotic, rogue bane. His door opened. Silas tried to shift, tried to call his wolf, but there was nothing. Just silence. Just a hollow emptiness where his power used to be. He looked up. Varric stood in the doorway. He wasn't bowing now. He was smiling. That cold, dead smile. "To victory," Varric mocked. Silas's world went black.
Thud. The sound was heavy. Wrong. It didn't belong in a honeymoon suite. Ivy blinked her eyes open. The room was dim, lit only by the moonlight spilling across the marble floor. She sat up, the silk sheets sliding off her bare shoulders. "Silas?" she whispered. No answer. A cold spike of fear drove itself into her chest. She scrambled out of the massive bed, her feet hitting the cold tiles. Then, she saw him. Silas was on the floor. The king, the man who had just carried her up the stairs like she weighed nothing, was crumpled in a heap near the balcony doors. "Silas!" Ivy dropped to her knees beside him. Her hands hovered over his body, afraid to touch him. He was shaking violently. His skin, usually warm and bronze, was turning a terrifying shade of gray. What's worse, there were lines. Black, spiderweb veins, creeping up his neck from his chest. "Silas, breathe!" she begged. She grabbed his hand. It was ice cold. His eyes were open. They were rolling back in his head, fighting to focus on her. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Just a wet, rattling gasp. "Poison." The word rang in her head like a funeral bell. "How touching." The voice came from the doorway. Ivy froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs, so hard it hurt. She turned her head slowly. General Varick stood there. He was still wearing his dress uniform. He looked calm, bored, even. He was holding a remote control in one hand and a pistol in the other. "Help him," Ivy choked out. "Something is wrong with him." Varick smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I know, my dear. I gave him the wine." The world stopped. The pieces clicked together. The gift, the guards outside, the easy assassin at the church. It was all a lie. "Why?" Ivy whispered. She shifted her body, putting herself between Varick and Silas, a human shield for a wolf. "Because he is weak," Varick sneered. He took a step into the room. "He plays house with commoners. He shows mercy. The pack needs a wolf, not a puppy." He raised the gun. He pointed it right at Silas's head. "Move aside, girl," Varick commanded. "Walk away, and I might let you live. Stay, and you die with him." Ivy looked at the gun. Then she looked at Silas. He was paralyzed, dying, unable to lift a finger to save himself. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was the stubbornness that had kept her alive through years of humiliation. Ivy didn't move away. Instead, she grabbed the heavy wine bottle from the floor, the very bottle that had poisoned him. "No," she said. Her voice trembled, but she didn't. "If you want him, you have to go through me."
He was trapped in a coffin made of his own skin. Silas could see everything. He could hear everything, but he couldn't move. The poison rogue bane was doing its job perfectly. It severed the neural pathways between his brain and his muscles. It locked his wolf away in a dark, silent dungeon deep in his mind. He stared up at the ceiling, the beautiful, hand-painted ceiling of the villa where he was supposed to make love to his wife. "Ivy." He heard her voice. He heard the fear in it. "Run," he screamed in his head. "Run, you stubborn woman. Leave me." But his mouth wouldn't open. His vocal cords were paralyzed. He heard Varick's footsteps. Click, clack. The sound of a traitor walking on the grave of his king. Because of that, Silas felt a rage so hot it should have burned the poison out of his blood. Varick had betrayed him. Fine, kings got betrayed. It was part of the job. But Varick was threatening her. Silas felt Ivy's hand on his chest. He felt her shift, her weight, covering him, blocking the bullet with her own soft body. "No, no, no." He watched Varick raise the gun. "Last chance, little queen," Varick said. "Run," Silas roared internally. "He will kill you." Crash. The glass balcony doors behind them shattered inward, not from a bullet, but from the wind. A storm was brewing outside, mirroring the one inside. The sudden gust caught the heavy curtains, whipping them toward Varick. It was a distraction, a tiny one, but Ivy took it. Her body moved on instinct. She didn't attack Varick. She knew she couldn't win that fight. She grabbed the edge of the heavy rug Silas was lying on. With a grunt of effort that tore at her throat, she yanked it. Hard. Silas slid across the polished marble floor. The movement was jarring. He spun, sliding away from Varick and toward the heavy oak door of the walk-in closet, the panic room entrance. Bang! A bullet chipped the tile where his head had been a second ago. "You little bitch!" Varick roared. Ivy didn't stop. She scrambled on hands and knees, grabbing Silas by the collar of his uniform. She dragged him. He was dead weight, 250 pounds of muscle. Even so, she moved him. She hauled him over the threshold of the panic room. She slammed the steel-reinforced door shut just as another bullet pinged off the metal frame. Click, whir, thud. The magnetic locks engaged. Silence. They were safe. For now. Silas lay in the dark, staring at her. She was panting, sweating, her dress torn. She looked at him. Tears were finally spilling over her lashes. "I've got you," she whispered. "I've got you, Silas." And for the first time in his life, the king realized he was the one who needed saving.
The panic room was small. It was stocked with water, dried rations, and monitors showing the rest of the villa. Ivy leaned against the cold steel door, sliding down until she hit the floor. Her lungs burned. Her arms shook from the effort of dragging him. She looked at the monitors. What she saw made her blood run cold. It wasn't just Varric. Outside, in the hallway, 5 more men had appeared. They were heavily armed, wearing tactical gear. They were setting up explosives on the door. "They're going to blow the door," she whispered. She looked at Silas. He was conscious. She could tell by his eyes, but he was fading. The black lines had reached his jaw. The poison was eating him alive. So, hiding wasn't an option. If they stayed in here, they died. If Varric blew the door, they died. If Silas didn't get an antidote, he died. Ivy crawled over to the weapons rack on the wall. It was impressive. Assault rifles, shotguns, knives. She had never held a gun in her life. She was a receptionist, a sister, a barren ex-wife. Despite that, she reached out, her fingers wrapped around a sleek black pistol. It was heavy, cold. She checked the chamber like she had seen in movies. "I can't stay here," she said aloud. She wasn't talking to Silas. She was talking to herself, convincing herself. If she stayed, she was just waiting for the executioner. But if she went out there, if she used the element of surprise, maybe she could take them out, or at least distract them long enough for help to arrive. She looked at Silas one last time. She crawled over and kissed his forehead. His skin was clammy. "I'm not going to let you die," she promised. Her voice was fierce. "I am going to get the antidote, or I am going to kill them all, trying." Silas's eyes widened. He was pleading with her. "Don't go." Ivy stood up. She wasn't wearing the crown anymore. It had fallen off in the bedroom, but she felt more like a queen now than she ever had in that cathedral. She hit the button to open the secret back exit of the panic room, a narrow ventilation shaft that led to the upper rafters of the villa. Before she could change her mind, she climbed in. She wasn't the prey anymore. Tonight, the rabbit was going to hunt the wolves.
Silence was heavy. It weighed more than the ocean outside. Silas lay on the cold steel floor of the panic room. His body was a statue, a monument to his own failure. The poison had done its work, blocking the signals at the neuromuscular junction, turning his own biology into a cage. He couldn't feel his legs. He couldn't feel his hands. He was trapped in a prison of flesh and bone, forced to stare at the gray ceiling while his mate fought a war he had started. Thump, a sound from the vents. Pop, pop, gunfire. Silas tried to scream. He tried to roar. He tried to summon the monster that lived in his chest and tear the walls down. Nothing happened. No growl, no shift, just the wet, rattling wheeze of his own lungs failing. He closed his eyes. "I did this," the voice in his head whispered. It sounded like Varric. "I brought her here. I put the crown on her head. I painted the target on her back." He had been so arrogant. He thought he was the king. He thought he was untouchable. He thought he could play games with assassins and win. Because of that, Ivy was going to die. He heard a crash above him, glass shattering, then a scream. It wasn't Ivy. It was a man's scream, a guttural, pain-filled sound that was cut short. Silas's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. She's fighting. She was fighting his battles. She was out there, in her torn wedding dress, holding a gun she barely knew how to use, facing trained killers. And he was lying here, useless. A tear leaked from the corner of his eye. It tracked a hot path down his temple and into his ear. It was the first time he had cried since he was a pup. "Move," he commanded his hand. "Move, damn you." Nothing. Even so, he kept trying. He focused every ounce of his will, every drop of alpha power he had left, on his right index finger. Twitch. It was microscopic, a tiny spasm, but it was there. The poison was strong. But his rage was older, deeper. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Then, silence. Not the heavy silence of waiting, the hollow silence of ending. Silas stopped breathing. He listened. He strained his ears until they rang. "Ivy?" No answer. Just the hum of the ventilation system and the beat of his own breaking heart.
Her hands were slick with sweat and blood. Ivy pressed her back against the kitchen island. Her chest heaved. Every breath burned like she had swallowed broken glass. She looked at the gun in her hand. The slide was locked back. Empty. What's worse, she didn't have a reload. She had taken out 2 of them, one with a tripwire she made from a lamp cord that sent him tumbling down the stairs. The other she had shot when he rounded the corner too fast. She didn't look at the bodies. If she looked, she would vomit. And she didn't have time to vomit. She was the hunter. She had to be. But now, the hunter was cornered. "Come out, little queen." Varric's voice echoed through the villa. "We know you're out of ammo." He was close. Too close. Ivy scanned the kitchen. Knives. There was a block of expensive Japanese steel knives on the counter. Instinct took the wheel. She lunged for them. Bang! A bullet smashed into the granite countertop inches from her hand. Stone fragments exploded, slicing her cheek. Ivy gasped and scrambled back, sliding across the floor. "Naughty!" Varric taunted. He was hurting her. Like cattle. He was pushing her toward the living room, toward the glass doors, toward the cliff. Despite that, she tried to find an exit. The side door? Blocked by a heavy cabinet she couldn't move. The hallway? That's where the shooter was. She was trapped. She crawled behind the sofa, her knees scraping on the floor. She felt small again, just like at the wedding, just like with Derek. "No," a voice inside her snarled. "Not like that." She wasn't hiding because she was ashamed. She was hiding to survive. She was hiding to buy Silas one more second of life. She spotted a heavy crystal decanter on the coffee table. Whiskey. Maybe it was fate. She grabbed it. It was heavy, solid, a poor weapon against a gun, but it was all she had. "There you are," Varric said. Ivy stood up. She didn't cower. She didn't beg. She stood up slowly, gripping the crystal bottle like it was a royal scepter. Varric stood across the room. He was alone now. His men were either down or guarding the perimeter. He looked at her, at the blood on her face, the rip in her dress, the fierce, wild look in her eyes. He smiled. "Impressive," he admitted. "For a breeder." Ivy threw the bottle. It sailed through the air. Varric didn't even flinch. He just stepped to the side. Crash. The whiskey soaked the rug. The distraction failed. Varric raised his gun. "End of the line, Ivy." He stepped forward, forcing her back, step by step, until her heels hit the metal track of the sliding glass doors. She backed out onto the terrace. The wind whipped her hair across her face. The ocean roared below, a black, hungry abyss. She had nowhere left to go. The drop was 300 feet. Ivy stood on the edge of the terrace. Her heels were hovering over nothing. Below her, jagged rocks and crashing waves. Varric stepped out onto the balcony. The wind tore at his uniform. He looked like death personified. "You have 2 choices," Varric shouted over the wind. "You jump, and the rocks take you. Or I shoot you. And I take the credit." Ivy looked at him. She looked at the gun pointed at her heart. She was going to die. The realization washed over her. It wasn't panic. It was a cold, quiet acceptance. She wasn't going to grow old. She wasn't going to have pups. She wasn't going to see Silas smile again. Her chest ached. Not from fear, but from grief. She had finally found him. She had finally found the one person who saw her, who made her feel like she had teeth. And now, it was over. "Well?" Varric barked. "Choose." Ivy straightened her spine. She wiped the blood from her cheek with the back of her hand. "I choose neither," she said. Her voice was snatched by the wind, but she knew he heard it. Varric laughed. "Defiant to the end. A shame. You would have made a decent pet." He tightened his finger on the trigger. Ivy closed her eyes. She didn't pray to the moon. She didn't pray to God. She thought of the bar, The smell of lime and tequila, the way Silas's eyes had looked when he handed her that whiskey. She realized she wasn't alone. She carried him with her. "Silas!" she screamed. She didn't scream for help. He couldn't help her. She screamed his name because it was the only thing that mattered. She screamed it like a war cry, like a vow. "Silas!" The sound ripped from her throat, raw and primal. It echoed off the cliffs. It pierced the storm. Varric sneered. "He can't hear you. He's dead by now." Click. The hammer of the gun pulled back. Ivy braced herself for the bullet. Boom. The floor shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It wasn't thunder. It was a vibration that came from deep inside the house. A rhythmic, heavy, impossible thudding. Thump, drag, thump, drag. Varric frowned. He turned his head toward the open doors. "What the—" Roar. The sound that erupted from the villa wasn't human. It wasn't wolf. It was the sound of a king who had crawled out of hell. The panic room door didn't open. It exploded, flying off its hinges, spinning through the air, crashing into the living room wall, and in the dust, in the shadows. Two burning golden eyes appeared.
Ivy. Her scream didn't just pierce the air. It pierced his soul. Silas lay in the dark. The paralysis was absolute. It was a cold weight, like being buried alive under 6 feet of wet earth. His lungs were burning with the lack of oxygen. His heart was a stuttering, failing drum. "She is calling me," his wolf snarled from the cage of his mind. "She is dying." The poison rogue bane was designed to kill alphas. It attacked the nerves. It shut down the power. It whispered that it was time to sleep. Then, he heard it again. "Silas." It wasn't a plea. It was a command. It was the voice of a queen demanding her king stand up. As if summoned, something inside him snapped. It wasn't biology. It wasn't magic. It was pure, unadulterated rage. No one takes her. Silas focused on the fire in his chest. He fed it with every memory of her. The way she looked at the bar. The way she smashed that tray. The way she dragged his dying body into this room. With every heartbeat, the fire grew. It burned through the ice in his veins. Crack. His femur snapped. Pain exploded. White hot and blinding. But pain was good. Pain meant nerves were firing. Pain meant he was alive. He forced the shift. Usually, shifting was fluid, like water flowing over stone. Not tonight. Tonight, it was a car crash. Crunch, snap, tear. His muscles spasmed, fighting the necrotic toxin. Fur burst through skin that was still gray with death. His jaw unhinged, elongating into a muzzle. But his human eyes remained, burning with a golden madness. He didn't fully shift. He couldn't. He was a monster. A hybrid of man and beast, broken and bleeding. Even so, he moved. He dug his claws long, serrated daggers into the steel floor. He dragged his body forward. His back legs were useless, dragging behind him like dead weight. Scrape, drag, scrape. He reached the door. The door Ivy had locked to save him. Varric was out there. Varric was going to kill her. Silas didn't have a key. He didn't have a code. So, he used his shoulder. He rammed the steel. Bam! The pain was exquisite. Again. Bam! The hinges screamed. The metal buckled. One more time. He pulled back, inhaling a breath that sounded like a dying engine. Roar! He threw himself at the barrier. The door flew off its frame. It crashed into the hallway wall, spinning like a coin. Silas crawled over the wreckage. He was drooling blood. He was dragging his paralyzed lower half. He looked like a nightmare dredged up from the ocean floor. But he was coming. "Hold on, Ivy." He broadcasted the thought, hoping she could feel it. "I'm coming."
The explosion deafened her. Ivy crouched on the balcony, her hands covering her ears. Debris and dust billowed out from the living room, clouding the air. Varric stumbled back, his gun wavering. He looked at the hole where the panic room door used to be. For the first time all night, the general looked afraid. "Impossible," Varric whispered. "He's dead. The poison." As the dust settled, a shape emerged from the shadows. It wasn't a man. It wasn't a wolf. It was horror incarnate. Silas dragged himself into the light. He was huge, hulking, his shirt shredded to ribbons hanging off black fur. His face was a distorted muzzle, teeth bared in a snarl that dripped bloody foam. His legs dragged behind him, useless, dead. Her heart skipped. He was fighting death itself, just to get to her. "Silas," she breathed. Varric recovered his senses. He raised the gun. "Die, you abomination." Bang! The bullet hit Silas in the shoulder. He didn't even flinch. He didn't stop. He didn't care. Her body moved on instinct. "No!" Ivy grabbed a heavy ceramic planter from the terrace railing. She didn't think. She hurled it at Varric. It smashed into his elbow. "Arg!" Varric's shot went wide, shattering the glass door. That distraction was all Silas needed. With a single glance at Ivy, a glance that said, "I love you and I'm sorry," he lunged. He used his massive front arms to launch himself off the floor. He flew through the air, a missile of black fur and vengeance. He slammed into Varric's chest. Oof! The impact was bone-breaking. Varric screamed as the air left his lungs. The gun clattered across the terrace and spun off the edge. But Silas's momentum was too great. His back legs couldn't break. He couldn't stop. They hit the railing. The wrought iron groaned, bent. And then, snap, the railing gave way. Evie screamed. "Silas!" She watched in slow motion. Silas and Varric, locked in a death grip, tumbled backward into the void. They fell. Down, 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 into the churning black water and the jagged rocks below. Splash. A massive plume of white water erupted. Then, nothing. Just the roar of the ocean. The balcony was empty. The wind howled, whipping her hair into her eyes, stinging her cut cheek. Ivy stood at the edge where the railing used to be. She gripped the broken iron bar until the rust bit into her palm. She stared down into the abyss. "Silas!" she cried out. Her voice was swallowed by the storm. Below, the water churned, white foam on black waves. In the silence that followed, her brain tried to process it. He was gone. He had saved her. He had taken the threat and thrown it off a cliff, and he had gone with it. She didn't know what scared her more, living without him, or seeing his body wash up on the rocks. She scanned the water frantically. There! A dark shape bobbing in the surf. A patch of black fur amidst the white foam. He wasn't moving. The waves were smashing him toward the razor-sharp rocks at the base of the cliff. He was paralyzed. He couldn't swim. He was going to drown or be broken apart against the stone. Maybe it was fate. Or maybe it was insanity. Ivy looked at the drop. It was high, dangerous. If she jumped wrong, she died. Then, she remembered his eyes. The way he looked at her when the glass shattered. "I've got you." He had caught her when she fell. Now, it was her turn. She kicked off her heels. She didn't think about the cold. She didn't think about the height. She didn't think about the fact that she was a human jumping into a wolf's ocean. Her soul answered the call. She climbed onto the ledge of the broken railing. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the salt air. "I'm coming," she whispered. She pushed off. Gravity took her. The wind rushed past her ears like a scream. The water rushed up to meet her, hard and fast and dark. She pointed her toes. She locked her arms. Smack. She hit the water. Cold, freezing, paralyzing, bone-crushing cold. It knocked the breath out of her. It spun her around in a chaotic washing machine of bubbles and darkness. Even so, she kicked. She fought the current. She fought the dress that tried to tangle her legs. She pushed toward the surface, toward toward the air, toward the king, who was waiting to be saved. The cold was a physical blow. It slammed into Ivy, knocking the air from her chest. Salt water flooded her nose. Darkness swallowed her whole. She spun in the chaotic current, tumbling, lost in the black churn of the ocean. Her wedding dress, once silk and light, was now a heavy anchor dragging her down. Kick. She forced her legs to move. Her lungs burned. Her eyes stung. Silas. She had to find him. She pushed toward the surface, toward the faint moonlight filtering through the water. She broke the surface. Gasp. She sucked in a lungful of air and freezing spray. Silas! She screamed, choking on salt. A wave crashed over her head, burying her again. No matter how hard she tried, the ocean wanted to keep her. But Ivy was done listening to what the world wanted. She surfaced again. She scanned the water. There, a dark mass, floating near the jagged rocks. Her heart stopped. He wasn't moving. He was face down. The king of wolves was drowning. Ivy swam. She fought the waves with everything she had. Her arms screamed in protest. Her dress tangled around her legs. She ripped the skirt. The expensive silk tore. She kicked free. She reached him. She grabbed a fistful of wet black fur. He was heavy, dead weight. "I've got you," she grunted. She rolled him over. His massive wolf head lolled back. His eyes were closed. His muzzle was slack. "Don't you dare," she hissed. "Don't you dare on me, Bartender." She grabbed his mane. She kicked for the shore. Clamp. Something grabbed her ankle. A hand. Ivy screamed. She looked down. Varric. He was clinging to a rock, blood streaming from his head. In his face, a mask of desperation. He had her leg. He was pulling her down to save himself. "Help!" he gurgled. Ivy looked at him. Then she looked at the unconscious wolf in her arms. The victim in her died right there. "No," she said. She didn't help him. She used her free leg. She kicked him, hard, right in the face. Varric's grip broke. His eyes went wide. The current caught him, dragging him away from the rocks, back into the hungry, dark water. He didn't surface again. Ivy didn't watch him go. She turned back to Silas. She dragged him onto the jagged shelf of rock at the base of the cliff. She collapsed, heaving, shivering, her hand buried in his wet fur. "Breathe," she begged. "Please, just breathe."
Pain. That was the first thing. Pain in his ribs, pain in his lungs, pain everywhere. But pain meant life. Silas coughed. Seawater and bile erupted from his throat. His body convulsed. He retched, gasping for air that tasted like salt and iron. The gray fog in his mind was lifting. The cold shock of the ocean had done something. It had shocked his system, stalled the poison just enough to let his heart beat again. He opened his eyes. The world was blurry, spinning. He was on rocks. He could feel the sharp stone digging into his back. He was human again. The shift must have reversed when he lost consciousness. He was naked, shivering, vulnerable. "Silas?" The voice was shaking. He turned his head. Ivy. She was kneeling over him. She was soaked, shivering, her hair plastered to her skull. Her dress was in tatters. She was bleeding from a cut on her cheek. She looked like a shipwrecked angel. "Ivy," he rasped. His voice sounded like gravel. "You're alive," she sobbed. She collapsed on top of him, burying her face in his neck. She was freezing. Silas tried to lift his arm. It felt like lead. Even so, he forced it to move. He wrapped his hand around her wet back. "You jumped," he whispered. He couldn't believe it. "You crazy woman. You jumped. You fell," she mumbled into his skin. "I had to go get you." Thwup, thwup, thwup. A sound cut through the wind. Helicopters. Lights blinded them from above, spotlights sweeping the rocks. A boat engine roared closer. "Secure the target," a voice amplified by a loudspeaker boomed. Soldiers in black gear were jumping from the boat onto the rocks. They had rifles raised. They didn't know who was friend or foe. They just saw two bodies. Silas tried to sit up, to command them. But he was too weak. Instead, Ivy moved. She didn't cower. She didn't hide behind him. She stood up. She stood over his broken body. She grabbed a jagged rock from the ground. She bared her teeth at the approaching soldiers. "Back off," she screamed. Her voice cracked with fury. "Do not touch him." The soldiers froze. They lowered their weapons. They saw the fire in her eyes. They saw the way she protected the king. Silas watched her from the ground. His heart swelled so big it hurt. She wasn't just his mate. She was his queen. And God help anyone who tried to hurt her ever again.
The throne room was quiet. Usually it was filled with noise, politics, arguments, but today it was respectful. Ivy sat on the velvet cushion of the throne, not the smaller one, the one next to Silas. Her hand rested on the armrest. Her fingers were interlaced with his. Silas sat beside her. He was still healing. He walked with a cane now, a temporary reminder of the fall, but he looked stronger than ever. The darkness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a warmth that was only for her. The doors opened. The High Council walked in. They bowed low, lower than they ever had before. They weren't bowing to the king. They were bowing to them. "Your Majesties," the head counselor said. "The remnants of Varric's faction have been routed. The kingdom is secure." Silas nodded. "Good." He turned to look at Ivy. He squeezed her hand. "And the rumors?" Silas asked. "About the queen?" The counselor looked at Ivy. There was no judgment in his eyes anymore, only fear and respect. "The rumors say she killed a general with a whiskey bottle and dove into a storm to save the king," the counselor said. "They say she is formidable." Ivy smiled. It wasn't a shy smile. It was a sharp one. "Tell them they're right," she said softly. Silas chuckled. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "You heard the queen," Silas told the room. "Dismissed." The council backed out. The heavy doors boomed shut. They were alone. Silas leaned over. He rested his forehead against hers. "Formidable," he whispered. "I like it. Better than leftovers," she teased. "Much better," he agreed. He pulled her closer. "I love you, Ivy," he said. The words were simple, heavy, real. "I love you too, Bartender," she whispered back. As the sun set through the stained glass windows, casting long shadows across the floor, Ivy realized the truth. She hadn't just survived the wedding. She hadn't just survived the fall. She had survived herself. She wasn't the girl who wished the floor would swallow her. She was the woman who swallowed the ocean and spat it back out. She was the queen. And she was finally, home.